Welcome, everybody. We're in session 9B. It's Adapt LibreTexts, the next generation of OER homework system. We are welcomed with Delmar, Larsen, and I am Jeanette Wiseman. I have the wonderful opportunity of working with this incredible all-volunteer staff that puts on the Peralta Equity Conference, and now in the third year. And I want to introduce Delmar Larsen. He is a professor of chemistry at UC Davis, where he runs the Larsen Lab. And in reading about you, Dr. Larsen, I learned that in your pursuit to lower costs for students, and especially textbook costs and other materials costs, that you created and are the founder and director of the LibreTexts project. And that is, if you're not familiar with it, it consists of 12 independently operating and interconnected libraries that focus on augmenting the post-secondary education in specific fields in STEM, sciences, and the humanities. And it has been supported by a U.S. National Science Foundation grant. And we are excited to learn more about what you have to tell us today. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Know that if you would like to see captions, that option is for you in the back, or I'm sorry, at the bottom, that you can read those captions. And also know that we are recording this, and this recording will be posted to the Peralta Equity Conference website. So thank you, Dr. Larsen, and I'm going to hand it over.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here virtually, that is. As was mentioned, my name is Delmar Larsen. I'm a professor of chemistry at UC Davis and the founder and executive director of the LibreTexts project. The LibreTexts, okay, here we go. So I oftentimes like to start my conversations by emphasizing who I am and where I come from. Even though that was a nice introduction, I'll focus on a couple other things. So as I mentioned, I'm a professor of chemistry at UC Davis, been here since 2005. My research focus is on ultrafast laser spectroscopies of photoactive biological systems. Basically, I shoot laser pulses into proteins and then look at what they do at a very fast time scale. But I'm not talking about that here. I'm talking about the LibreTexts project and the development of the homework system in part in order to address equity, which is essentially the theme of the entire project. We started the LibreTexts project in 2008, then as an open pedagogy project called the ChemWiki. It was based upon capitalizing on the wiki-based features that allow for collaborative construction efforts, because we had lots of students that were going through our classes in the chemistry department. Routinely, I would teach classes that had 450 to 500 students, and this provided a great opportunity for students to contribute to the development of the open corpus. I'm the founder of the UC Davis Aggie Open, which is the program, the OER program on my campus. I'm an adopter of OER, I'm an adapter of OER, I'm a creator of OER, and I'm a curator of OER, where OER is open educational resource. And the point of these four things is to emphasize that I'm a practitioner of OER. So not only do I advocate for OER and its implementation at multiple campuses and multiple departments, I have not used a commercial product in any of my classes for the last 8 years, maybe 9 years. There's one core value that underlies our project, which is essentially students are not a market to exploit and to make a profit from. So that is the key essence that we want to be able to pursue what we pursue. And what exactly do we pursue? Well, here's our mission statement. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that is comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. So each of these letters that are bolded, these 3 C's, are particularly important in terms of dictating our approach in advancing that core value I mentioned before. But each of the letters, or each of the words that are in the parentheses here, construction, curation, adoption, adaption, are critical mechanistic aspects of how we actually operate. So the community aspect means not just us or just on my campus. It means anyone who has an interest in order to contribute to OER and promote OER in order to handle jump over the equity gap that's been limiting. Well, it's been a barrier for equity for a long time. We are focused around OER, openly licensed materials. We can define OER in a variety of different ways, but that would take a long time in order to discuss. For the sake of this conversation, I'll just mean it's freely available in order to be able to do a wide range of different aspects associated with it. It's comprehensive in that while I'm a faculty in the chemistry department and the LibreTexts project was born out of a project dealing with chemistry, it's grown significantly over the last 15 years to be comprehensive across multiple fields. Essentially, we follow a no gap left behind policy. If there's a specific topic that's used in academia, we're interested in order to be able to pursue that. We also follow a no tech left behind policy, which means that as emerging open source technology becomes available, we integrate it into our platform and provide the opportunity that users, faculty, students can capitalize on that technology without having to learn about how to implement that technology on a local perspective. That results in what I refer to as the textbook of the future, augmenting textbooks with future capabilities, or in the sake of the homework system, of discussing introducing additional advanced features off of there. And lastly, the content that we are creating and hosting is meant to be curatable, which means that we can go in and edit it as necessary. That means it's a dynamic living library, not a static living library. If you want to have an example of a static living library, that'd be something similar to a Google Drive full of PDFs. While you can edit it, it's typically a painful process in order to update. So you need to have an infrastructure to facilitate easy curation often. And that curation aspect is critical in terms of defining us compared to other projects out there that have similar scope that are not so concerned about curation, and they just basically are publishing platforms. So why is this particularly important for this conference? Well, removing the financial burden of forcing students to pay, significantly at least, for required educational resources is one of the first steps in bridging the equity gap. Once you're able to remove that, you can start to implement other aspects that are necessary in order to be able to advance that. But while you have the situations that you separate the haves and the have-nots in terms of the quality of education that they have, or to the detriment of their lifestyle and their existence, you're not going to be able to address many of the issues that you want to be able to address. OER in general enables this because it frees the funds that could be better spent in other cases, whether it happens to be in order to address food or housing or other insecurity issues that are plaguing students, not just in the state, but in the world. OER has lots of other features than just the financial aspects that's important to emphasize. One aspect that's particularly important on my campus is the ability in order to customize the resources in order to suit the needs of the faculty member and to customize the resources in order to address the student and class identities. And this is one of the key features associated with the construction of ADAPT that was supported by the California Education Learning Lab in order to implement culturally responsive pedagogy into our infrastructure. So with that aside, let me start going into a little bit of details. So the bigger picture of ADAPT is that it fits into what we refer to as the LibreVerse. Now, the LibreVerse is this ecosystem to promote our mission, which is multiple technologies that coexist and interact with each other in order to be able to advance what we want. So we have the core, which are libraries, which we have 14 independently operating libraries, which hosts our textbook content. If you're unfamiliar with our platform, I encourage you to Google your field and our name, and you'll find resources in order to free resources that you can capitalize on for your educational needs, whether it's creating textbooks or reviewing content in order to be used in class and such. There are ancillary materials around these libraries, and I don't want to go into all of them. I just want to focus on the homework system, which is ADAPT. And the approach that we have is that one of the critical limitations of scaling up the impact of OER is that faculty have gotten used to the all-in-one model that publishers provide, so that when you adopt a book, you also have a homework system that's accompanying the book, that's aligned to the book, and other ancillary materials like PowerPoints and such in order to be able to complement that. For us to be able to provide freely available textbooks to faculty that want to adopt it, we need to be able to provide a homework system that's able to complement that. And that's what ADAPT is designed in order to do. I'm going to skip over that because I largely said it before, and I just want to emphasize one of the key aspects behind how we operate. The OER universe is fragmented. When I say fragmented, I basically am meaning that OER content can be found in a variety of different places. You can find links to content in the open textbook library. It's more of a library guide than a library because it doesn't host stuff or referatory. OER Commons, OpenStax, Merlot, Sunny, Galileo, Open Oregon, Nova, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Sailor, Cal State University System, Oregon State University, and numerous other places. OER is distributed all over the universe, or at least the world, and it's stored on many faculty's computers, and that much of the content that faculty created would fall into the category of OER. And that fragmentation is very limiting in terms of promoting OER because we result in a two-step forward, one step back situation. Every time we advance, someone else is advancing in a similar fashion, and we're just basically replicating the wheel. Our approach for the entire LibreVerse, whether it's the ADAPT homework system or it's our libraries, is that we're building a better bucket of Legos. We're taking existing content, capitalizing on the O and OER, and what we refer to as harvesting the content and standardizing it, making it so that all the pieces are Lego blocks, for example, that if that box of Legos is big enough, if we've harvested enough content, then essentially being able to construct new content by individual faculties is limited only by its imagination, by their imagination. We have 500,000 pages of content on our libraries. We have 150,000 questions of content. Much of it has been harvested from other repositories that's available for faculty and students in order to capitalize on. We're significantly advancing it through other funds that we received. We received $5 million from the U.S. Department of Education about 4.5 years ago in order to advance this. We also just received $4 million from the state of California in order to advance, adapt significantly, largely dealing with STEM fields, although we have an interest outside of STEM fields. So this provides the ability in order to centralize the content. It provides the ability to standardize the content, make it easier in order to mix things together. You can make things interconvertible from one component of one repository to another component. You can build collections, aka courses or textbooks. You can make them flexible, they're curatable. It essentially is the best case scenario in order to centralize the content and provide it to faculty, because I don't know any faculty member that doesn't want to have access to a massive free question bank of content that, as I will argue, has other features like algorithmic capabilities and feedback and other things that are involved in order to make a very powerful platform. So I'm going to skip over the corpus of it here and go straight into the homework system instead of giving the background that I gave before. So we knew that we wanted to build a homework system almost from the very beginning of our project. But it's only been in the last few years that we've been able to make any serious headway off of that. And the reason for that is multifaceted. But this is the key question that we had to address, is how do we build an online homework system that complements the utility of the LibreTexts infrastructure, the library infrastructure I showed before, harvesting books and organizing and creating customized books. But you want to make something that's flexible, dynamic, comprehensive, integrated, LMS agnostic. Now, while the state of California has been moving their LMSs to Canvas, there are plenty of other campuses, both in America and the world, that don't use Canvas. And we want it to be powerful and free or nearly free. We need some funds in order to maintain the infrastructure out there. And the answer to that is essentially slowly and efficiently. We want to design a homework system that relies on what people have done before. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. And that is an essential theme in terms of OER in general, because it follows the sharing is caring model. Now, there's a range of different technologies out there that we've capitalized in order to be able to address the ADAPT infrastructure. ADAPT is an overlay on top of much of those technologies, although we built our own, and bringing it together so that it's easier in order to master. The ADAPT homework system, again, is free to all faculty and students in the state. You can access it at adapt.libretext.org. Because it's a corpus of questions, you need to get an account as an instructor in order to be able to tap into those questions, because we preserve the integrity of the question bank for everybody. So let me just talk about what ADAPT consists. So ADAPT is freely available to all verified instructors. You can tap into and view over 150,000 questions and growing rapidly as we harvest other repositories of content out there, whether they are question banks that are in Canvas Commons or they're from other individuals across the country that we are capitalizing on and integrating. The ADAPT homework feature, that is the auto-grading capabilities and passing and using the technologies in order to use this in the classroom, are free to students and faculty in the state of California. That's because the state of California invested significantly in terms of building ADAPT, and this was part of the deliverable that we gave to that. Outside of the state of California, it's super cheap. It's $15 per semester, 10,000 per term, comprehensive for students, and it's very powerful, as hopefully I'm going to be able to demonstrate to you. But that's necessary for sustainability. If I didn't have to do that, I wouldn't want to do that. But we need to maintain the infrastructure out there for the system. So let me just talk about ADAPT from a technical perspective. So the idea behind ADAPT is that there is no one technology that's able to cover the scope that the LibreTexts project has, this comprehensive nature, from art to biology to anatomy to mathematics and a wide other range of fields. So we didn't want to try to build a technology that had limited scope in one field versus the other. What we wanted to do, and what we did do, was essentially to capitalize on existing technologies and integrate them into ADAPT. So ADAPT becomes a wrapper on top of other technologies that have matured, in many cases matured significantly, that we then benefit from that. So we have two types of questions in our infrastructure. We have the auto-graded questions and we have the open-ended questions. So there are just some questions that we can't create auto-graded technology in order to address, and they require open-ended reading in order to be able to do, although there are some suggestions that ChatGPT will provide some capabilities in order to augment that. And if you have an interest, I could discuss our progress on that, which is changing daily, actually. So nonetheless, we have questions that are auto-graded, and they rely currently on 4 different types of technologies. One is WebWork, which is a technology that originated in the University of Rochester in the middle 90s. And it's based predominantly on, or predominantly focused on mathematics and engineering. Especially upper divisional, and it's more popular in the R1 institutions and the universities than the community colleges. ADAPT is also based off of IMathAS, which is the technology that underlies MyOpenMath or Lumen Learning's own infrastructure. So if you have a MyOpenMath question, you can embed that into our instance and it can work with ADAPT. And we have many people who've converted their question banks and courses from MyOpenMath into ADAPT. We have a repository of H5P. I'll mention it briefly, and if we have time, I can certainly go through H5P, which is a newer technology. It's very graphical. It has some additional features that are better or better suited for non-STEM fields in WebWork and IMathAS, but it has some other limitations that I'll be discussing too. And then we have native technology that runs on top of ADAPT. That right there will run questions that come from what's referred to as QTI protocol, Question Test Interoperability. Not to drop too many terms off of that, that's this protocol that's used in Canvases and many other learning management systems. So in other words, if you have a question bank in your learning management system, we can integrate it into ADAPT. And the goal off of here is having things centralized that you can do searches and find things as appropriate, then benefits everybody in the community that you can then use and will find and use effectively off of that. Open-ended questions don't require much technology in order to implement. Students can submit different types of text. They can submit audio. That's useful for learning languages or music submissions. They can submit files for review, PDFs, Excels, and things like that. We're using a mixture of files and text for our lab reports in my chemistry class this term. That's also then folded into ChatGPT to provide the TA with feedback in certain objectives if the lab report is done successfully. The intent of that is to make grading a bit easier and more consistent amongst the class. So I mentioned these 3 different technologies. I four different technologies. I want to just discuss it a little bit more because it's important in order to put adapt within the context of other technologies out there. So these are the four ones I mentioned before. We have other technologies that we are implementing into adapt, including organic chemistry, the ability in order to build molecules and submit molecules for review. That should be released this summer, again, thanks to the support from the state of California. Spreadsheets, which give us the ability in order to do accounting or statistics. A Jupyter Notebook system, which gives us the ability in order to grade executable code. And then I'll talk about clicker or in-class response systems a little bit later on. So WebWork, IMathAS, and QTI are all what's referred to as server-side technologies. Those are basically the technologies that give us the ability that runs on our computers, and it provides security that's out there. H5P is client-side, which means it's run on the person's computers that's actually looking at that. Now, this sounds like it's kind of a technical diversion. The key point that I want to be able to emphasize here is that WebWork, IMathAS, and QTI have strong security. H5P is a very insecure product, which means that it's really well suited for formative use and less suited for summative use. If it's to be used for summative use, it should be used with low stakes summative use. And I emphasize this because there are other individuals in the community that like to argue that H5P is a homework system. And if I were to construct a homework system or homework for my class out of H5P and understood that students can hack into it with no effort at all, I would be particularly upset if I were using it for a summative case. I will also mention that the WebWork, IMathAS, and QTI gives us a lot of control over accessibility, which is required for both ethical and legal implications. But H5P has some limited accessibility out there, and we facilitated individuals, authors, access to accessibility guide in order to try and make their content as accessible as possible. And I can show that to you as possible. But the key point is that not all of these technologies have similar capabilities. And please be aware of that if you're looking at H5P in the future. So let me just emphasize these key points here. Any homework infrastructure needs to have the same set of capabilities, at least the same core capabilities. It needs to have a mechanism for building questions, building a library, library storing, searching, delivering it, assessing it, and that's checking if it's correct, a grade book, and then interactions with a learning management system. And each of these technologies has their own interface. Off of that. The problem that we have oftentimes is that when a faculty member masters one of these technologies, they typically don't go in and master another one, because each of these things are unique in order to be able to master. And that is a detriment, because there's a very large question bank in WebWork and a very large question bank in MyOpenMath or IMathAS, and there's a lot of questions in QTI and such. So choosing one significantly limits the ability, the effective choosing of one, and the resistance in order to adopt other ones significantly reduces the number of homework problems that an individual faculty member has access to. So what we are doing is we're essentially bringing them together and centralizing them so that each homework system technology is unique in our platform, but we remove the things that's centralized, that's easily separated from these technologies, and integrate it into ADAPT, so that individuals, faculty members, can make homework problem sets from a wide range of different technologies. And they're perfectly effective in order to be able to do in that way. And that provides massive scalability in terms of power for the instructor. ADAPT is designed for multimodal use. It has the ability in order to give, let's say, traditional approach for delivering questions where you have assignments. Assignments are open on a specific date and closed on a specific date, and you add questions into the assignments. It could be open-ended or auto-graded, and students submit them and that goes back. But ADAPT is designed in order to have some basic adaptive learning features. And the key component behind that is the learning tree. And the learning tree approaches a decision tree issue. Instead of giving an individual student a single question to solve, they are given a tree where if a student passes the root question, the top question on that tree, they can go on to the next question. But if they fail that question, they have the opportunity in order to go into the tree, and the tree guides them in terms of trying to identify what skills they need in order to master in order to do the question again. We give them opportunity to do a do-over if they study and master one of the skills or multiple skills in the tree, and it acts as a virtual tutor of sorts. One way in order to view this is as a choose your own adventure story. And in contrast to black box algorithmic approaches, this is a simpler approach, but this right here favors giving students agency in their education. We're not spoon feeding them what they need to do at any one time in order to be able to master the homework that they happen to have. It provides them the opportunity in order to develop self-efficacy. It provides them the opportunity in order to develop metacognition. In other words, we're building using learning trees instead of black box algorithms that are out there. We're building more robust learners and students that we want to go out in the real world instead of being crippled by spoon feeding and the detrimental impact of spoon feeding. Lastly, ADAPT is built for multimodal use. There's a wide range of different work or use cases for ADAPT. Students can access ADAPT directly through its website, which is adapt.libretext.org. And I'll show you the URL again if you didn't catch that before. ADAPT can embed questions either formatively or summatively into textbooks. So in other words, the textbook itself, specifically a LibreText, can be the homework system for the students. Now, I believe that that is superior to having homework separate as a separate site from the textbook, but I have no data to be able to argue that, and I haven't seen anyone publish any data in order to justify that. But I believe that anything that increases the engagement between the students and the material in the textbook is a good thing. And I think that that's what happens when you make your textbook into a homework system. Again, this is part of building the textbook of the future. You can then embed the textbook into your learning management system, and we do that in a variety of different campuses, such that students never even know that ADAPT exists, and barely even know that LibreText exists. It's just within their learning management system. Students can access, or they will when we release this app in a few months, access their homework system through their phone as a more native technology than with the textbooks and learning management and such. This provides an opportunity in order to use ADAPT as a clicker system. So you can remove one less cost from students in order to master the material in the class. They don't need to pay for iClicker or other technologies out there. And it pipes the scores back into learning management learning LMS directly. It also provides us the opportunity in order to capitalize on what the phone's technologies that's useful for submissions, for example, the camera. So students can actually submit open-ended results by taking a picture and submit that directly in a much cleaner process than taking a picture, converting it to PDF, upload it, and then go through several steps, which can be a very time-consuming process, as many of us learned during the pandemic when we shifted to online education. Lastly, you can use ADAPT as an add-on into learning management systems that can integrate directly via an LMS, just like other external tools that are out there. So I mentioned H5P a handful of times. The H5P repository is freely available for everyone in the community in order to capitalize on. You can access it at studio.libretext.org. If you go to this, you can request an account directly from us, and I'll give you an email address in a moment. And this provides an opportunity in order to rapidly create these H5P assessments, and those can then be embedded again in ADAPT, or they can be used formatively in a variety of other sources. It's a free available resource supported by the state of California, but essentially anyone who uses LibreText has access to this. This is an example of embedding a H5P question into an intermediate nutrition course. This is a course at Kansas State University by Brian Lynchfield, and it's a relatively simple true-false questions out there. Again, it's one of 4 technologies that you have access to, and he's been using this successfully for the last couple of years. I mentioned this before. We have a new app that we're going to be releasing soon, phone app. I'm very excited about this, in part because I know very little about phone act technology, so I'm learning a lot. But this provides an opportunity again to provide a polling infrastructure to students, so you can increase engagement of students in the class material or class conversation by being able to submit the scores and then use that as a mechanism to guide the conversation out there. It's freely available, coupled into the Adapt homework system, and it will be released in both iFrame and Android in the next couple of months. Um, and there was a question here that at some point it will show you that same, here we go, I missed it. It will show you that same question right there, which is here, in this case, here's a question dealing with distillation, I think. Well, it's not distillation, but it's a question in chemistry class made at the University of Arkansas that you can, again, tap into. And if you're unfamiliar with the general cost for iClickers, there's somewhere on the order of $25 to $35 per student per class. Well, not per class, but per student. I already showed you this slide in terms of the H5P. Adapt is also designed in order to capitalize on the data effectively. So in other words, we are building a learning analytics dashboard, an infrastructure in order to provide detailed information on how students are interacting with the homework system. It also couples into how students are interacting with a LibreTexts textbook. So it can give you detailed information about how your textbook is used. And that right there can provide valuable information that can guide the pedagogy in your classroom and guide the efficacy testing of the resources that you are creating, whether they're homework or they are the textbook related material. This is an example of a study I did close to a decade ago, where I taught 2 back-to-back classes, about 500 students each, one using the LibreText, then called the ChemWiki, and the other one was using a commercial textbook. And the point of this was to evaluate the efficacy of our project. And what we demonstrated was that it was not poorer than a textbook at that time, and significantly advanced since then. But the key point that we had here from the analytics perspective is, and this is just looking at the class that used the LibreText, I was able to identify, in this case here, the number of page views per day, and I could see the students studied quite extensively right before the exams. In fact, many of the students studied only right before the exams. So in other words, they were cramming, and we identified that cramming students performed about 10% lower than non-cramming students. Presumably that's connected to cramming process, but that is a correlation, not a cause and effect, just to be academically honest there. But what I tried to do the next term was to reduce that cramming by doing weekly quizzes instead of these midterms, and try to increase the background higher and decrease the aspect ratio of cramming and studying to non-studying. In this case here, it was successful. However, I couldn't compare these numbers with these numbers because it was a summer class, a different cohort of students, different size. It wasn't very useful off of that. But the key point off of that is that this provides valuable information to guide the pedagogy in my class. And I've used that this as a valuable mechanism in order to augment the way that I teach my chemistry classes right now. This is an example of the learning analytics dashboard that we have right now, where it's looking at a specific page. So in blue is the entire textbook and the usage for last winter's general chemistry class. And this one specific page, I can identify when students were reading it. So when I ask students to study, I can actually check to see if they truly are studying. I have about 10 minutes left. I want to give a couple ending slides, and then if people have questions, I can pull up the actual infrastructure and start to show you these things in different areas now that we have a critical mass of people here. So I will end with what I started, which is our mission statement. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption of OER, whether that's textbook or homework, that's comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. And again, this follows the belief that students are not a market to exploit, nor to make a profit off of. And that is why we are doing what we are doing. So if you want more information, you can request access codes at adapt.libretext.org. We have a video series. Should be Mini Fest, which is a series of videos that we did for a workshop that's available at youtube.libretext.org. And then if you want to have access or tap into the H5P repository, you can go to studio.libretext.org. And I can show you each of these things if you want in the remaining time that's available. And I'm going to I will mention that we have a few advancements that we are focusing on in ADAPT. One is, thanks to the state of California, we're investing significantly in terms of building the question infrastructure around STEM fields, specifically chemistry, well, actually all STEM fields, spread over 4 years. Thankfully, $4 million can go a long way in order to really advance that. If anyone has any questions, question banks, whether they happen to be in STEM or not STEM, that you want to dedicate or donate to us with proper attributions, assuming they're openly licensed, please get a hold of us. We have a great interest in order to be able to augment this for the community. With that, and I will also mention that we partnered with the Wisconsin technical schools in order to expand ADAPT in order to address the next generation nursing questions. So there's a range of different types of questions that are very unique to nursing that we have implemented into ADAPT. So if anyone's in nursing here or knows of nursing colleagues in your campus, this infrastructure is freely available in order to capitalize on. And I have examples of that if you have an interest in order to be able to do so. With that, I will stop with this. I can answer any questions, or I can actually go directly to the ADAPT infrastructure. Will you be sharing the yes, I will, Sophia. I'm not entirely sure how. I think it was probably in the documentation somewhere in terms of how to upload my presentation. Jeanette's gonna probably tell me that.
That'll be available up on the website along with the recording.
There you go.
On our YouTube channel.
Correct. On the YouTube channel, the link to exactly. You can go through the website and there'll be a link to that.
I don't see any other questions. Do you want me to parse through ADAPT or Studio, or would you like to do that on your own free time? I feel like I'm teaching my class when I talk to my class and no one responds to me. I have to start pointing to people and say, what about you? Okay, so since I have Studio open, this is Studio. Studio is our repository for H5P. And like I said, you can have access to that if you like, just get a hold of us. And it has about right now 11,000 questions that are public, and it has another 6,000 to 7,000 questions that are private. So you can create questions that are only used for yourself, that doesn't quite share with the community, but I understand that some people may want to close their questions up for a variety of purposes. So in this case here, I didn't take a look at these things. So this is a question dealing with, this is a drag and drop question dealing with some issues of mineralogy, where you can come in and you can do this. So this is where H5P really stands out, is the graphical interface that the other technologies we have are less developed in. The problem with this, like I mentioned with H5P, is accessibility and security. And the accessibility issues, this question right here, this thing right here, requires a significant backup, because in order to use this properly, you need to have fully functioning or reasonably functioning eyes, and many students don't have or have a disability in their eyes. So this right here is then, if you use it, you will be limiting the scope and even well, you'll be limiting the scope of the homework system or the question itself, and you'll be in violation of ADA and other rules out there for accessibility. But there are alternatives in order to be able to address this, so you can actually use this effectively as long as you have a backup that does so, and that is what adapt does. So I encourage you to take a look at the studio.libretext.org. I will paste it here into the chat, the URL that is. And I encourage you to take a look and such. We have a lot of people who've been building collections to accompany books that people can grab on. H5P has been growing rapidly in the community for a while now. It's been about, I think it's 10 years old. Adapt, again, is the super project on top that that Studio can contribute to, in addition to the other components that we have here. So I'm registered right now as myself, and these are the courses that I have created for my class at different times and different dates. I have not archived them. I'm currently teaching a general chemistry class for majors. And this is the infrastructure how I have. It consists again of a course, assignment, and questions off of here. I'm pretty aggressive in my homework system. I showed you this. The pedagogy that I got, or I showed you the analytics and how I use that in order to guide pedagogy. The outcome from that is that I have students submit homework every day. Whether it's light homework, like a couple questions that are not meant to be hard, just to make sure the juices are flowing, or it's a full-blown worksheet that they go through that. And then I drop them at different times in order to deal with various issues. But this right here has significantly improved the performance of the students in my class, has reduced that barrier, and students have consistently argued that they like this approach versus a more free-range based approach for things. So I'm going to go to the lecture homework. So this is the first lecture homework. It consists of 3 problems. These are titles that students don't see. They're just internal titles for the problems. I can modify that in a variety of cases. This right here is a WebWork question. So that's the nature of the technology. And students can also upload a file. I have them upload a file if they want to submit their work for the question. So while it's auto-graded, if the students decide that they want to request a partial grade, I will only consider a partial grade if they submit the work that they did for that submission. It's not an after the fact matter type of thing. So in this case here, here is a question. And it's a pretty simple question, just dealing with conservation of energy and flowing from potential to kinetic and vice versa. Because this is an assignment that was already given, I can see the performance on the class, which is, it's a super small class. It's like 16 students or so, although that says only 14 have submitted, so a few students didn't do it. Gives me the statistics, and I believe strongly that homework should be pedagogical. The students should learn from the homework. It's not just meant as an assessment infrastructure. So that means that the homework solution needs to be very detailed in order to be able to advance some learning from it. So we go through a lot of effort. This is not of all 150,000 questions, because it takes a lot of time to do this, but we are slowly going through this, especially in the STEM fields, to make questions as useful as possible to learn from, not just basically here's the answer and then off you go. And that's my approach. In this case here, this is not a terribly informative solution. It just gives me the answer off of that. So I would like to have that expanded out when we have time, but it does get the point across, and all the students got it right, and such. So I can go through that. I have a wide variety of use cases or options in order to be able to submit these questions either real time or where the students can get instant feedback on their performance, or delayed, where I don't give them feedback off of there. Questions can be made algorithmic, so every student can get a different question, whether that happens to be the numbers are changing in the question, or they can also be sampling, where they can sample questions from a pool of questions. They can say these are the questions that are all comparable complexity and scope, and that the students will get a range of different things that are out there. And a handful of other features off of there. I mentioned learning trees. Most of the learning trees that we have in Adapt are based off of general chemistry, because that's what the grant from the state of California is, although there are more people who are interested in order to develop the learning trees for other fields. So this is an example of a learning tree. So here would be the question that the students get. So it's a simple in the sense it's an auto-graded question that the students can write in. If they get it wrong, they then go into what we call a strategy map that tells the students what they need to master that question, and then they're able to guide themselves into, well, where do they want to go? This is the agency component that I believe is important for students in order to master. And if they, for example, demonstrate proficiency in one of the skills, they then get a do-over and they can come back up in order to be able to do that. So that's a general approach of the learning tree. There's lots of evidence to argue that this is superior than just an individual question out there. We're putting a lot of effort in order to be able to expand these things, especially in the STEM fields, but anyone in the non-STEM fields can tap into it, and you can do searches and such if you want. And I'll just mention at the end that we have a commons, which is where we've been collecting questions around specific textbooks that individuals can tap into, whether they're OpenStacks or a wide range of other ones, and continually to expand them algorithmically and solution off of there. With that, I will end, and thank you for your attention, and feel free to get a hold of me if you have any questions off of here. This is a infrastructure made for you in order to advance your educational needs and also to help the students out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining. We are continuing the conference. There will be a session starting in the next 15 minutes. And also I just want to make sure that everyone knows that Adora did add the YouTube link as well in the chat. So if anybody wants to see where this recording is. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.